if you've been holding yourself to a higher standard your entire life and you've met it every single time, it's hard to tell those type of people to lower their standards. That's not the type of advice. That's honestly an insult. And I mean that. And to be honest with you, we're too old for that shit. We cannot be telling people to lower their standards. That's not the world we live in.
Booked and unbothered, confidence and courage, mindset and messy middle moves of entrepreneurship.
Welcome to the Booked and Unbothered podcast, the podcast for high-value women navigating mindset, marketing, and messy middle moves of entrepreneurship. Here is where we turn clarity into cash and presence into power. I'm your host, Yarden Carroll, mother to 3 amazing boys, wife, storyteller, and brand engineer. Mic on? Let's get into it.
So I'm going to say something that is going to probably make you extremely uncomfortable. And I mean, let's just get into it. I want you to know that perfectionism is not your problem. And just stay with me, because I know that sounds like I'm about to tell you to lower your standards, just start, or whatever BS you've been hearing in these internet streets. That's not what I'm going to do. I would never. I really want to tell you that what I'm going to say is more important than that, because most of us, myself included, are calling this perfectionism. The rewriting the landing page, the refining the offer that we haven't launched yet, I gotta be ready or not getting the website, the content that never quite feels right enough to post. That has nothing to do with perfectionism. And it's something else, something with a different name, a different root cause, and a completely different solution that I want to talk about. And when we keep treating the wrong thing, and when we keep telling ourselves to push through, to just lower the standards, done is better than perfect, or just be brave, you're always going to remain stuck and revert back to that same loop. And it's not because you're not trying. It's because no one is really giving you an accurate diagnosis. And that's what I want to do today. That's what I did in the first episode. That's what my goal is to do on this podcast, is to name what it is that the problem is. So if you're new here, I'm relatively new too, and I want to welcome you to the Booked and Unbothered podcast. And this is the podcast for high-value service providers who are building profitable businesses, profitable brands, while juggling motherhood and navigating the messy middle. And I'm Yarden Carroll, and I help high-value service providers not only strengthen and package their expertise, but I help them build businesses that create more clarity for them, consistency and capacity. And I do this through organic marketing. And I really want to set the stage of my own journey and why I felt it was imperative for me to share. Because I was in this loop last year. I actually have been sitting on this podcast for over a year, and I recorded so many episodes. I listened back to them, and I just could not bring myself to release them. I deleted them. And I kept thinking to myself that it doesn't sound like me. It just something feels off. It's not perfect enough. And I wanted to script these episodes to the point where it took out the personality, it took out the emotional resonance, it took out the connection piece, and it just didn't feel right. So I kept trying, I kept re-recording things, I kept refining it to the point where I got sick of my own shit, to be honest with you. And I just stopped. And it was really hard for me to admit that what I wanted to release wasn't perfect. And it wasn't until I stopped trying to fix the output that I realized that the problem wasn't about the output. It was a lot to do with what was happening underneath. And a friend of mine said something to me recently that stopped me completely, stopped me from deleting the episodes that I recorded, because this is coming out July 1st. So I deleted episodes that I recorded prior to that. And when I told her when I did it, she said something to me that really resonated and helped me not only detach from the outcome, but helped me to detach from this weird obsession I had with perfectionism. And she said to me that to be perfect is to be completely disconnected from your human soul. And when she said that, I just couldn't help but record these episodes and think of the immense value and the disservice that I would be missing out on and the disservice I would be giving my listeners if I tried to show up perfect and polished and as this person that doesn't say and doesn't curse. And I just couldn't do it. So I really want to show you what perfectionism actually means, where it comes from, and why the conventional wisdom around it is fucking wrong, and what's actually underneath and the patterns that you keep calling a flaw. But by the end of this episode, I'm really hopeful that you're going to understand the real root of the perfectionism and not the surface level bullshit or behavior, but the origin and why just lowering your standards is the wrong advice and me just or people just telling you to start and done is better than perfect. But I really want to give you a shift that is actually going to change the pattern. And I just want to get right into what that looks like. But before I talk about what those three myths are, I need to give you some information that's going to help reframe and change everything because I've also heard some outrageous and outlandish things that perfectionism is a personality trait. And I don't look at it as a personality trait. I think it's more of a protection mechanism. And the distinction between the two is supported by lots of research, where there was a research article that was published in 2025 by a psychologist named Annie Wright, who confirms that what I've seen and heard and most of the client relationships that I've had is oftentimes people label perfectionism as a high achieving status. You know, if you're a high achiever, you are a perfectionist. And I'm like, that's bullshit. And I actually think that it's aligned with the research that perfectionism is often a nervous system that's on high alert. And it's people who are scanning for potential threat or shame. And then the behavior it isn't driven by pride, it's driven by that protection mechanism. And if you think about what that means, it's about if you think about how it relates or how it correlates to your business. Think about the rewriting, how often you've rewritten your website page. And it's not because you want it to be better. Think about the refinement that you've made about carrying that invisible load of what other people have projected onto you. And it's almost ready that never becomes ready because it's not because of your high standards. It's really about protecting your nervous system. It's about safety. It's about the nervous system and how it's learned somewhere, somehow, that those rooms you're in, they taught you this lesson that imperfection was dangerous. And I really want you to sit with that for a second before we go any further, because if perfectionism is a protection mechanism and it's not a personality trait, then the solution is not to push harder and it's not to care less. It's not to lower the bar. The solution is to really understand what is that perfectionism protecting? What is it protecting you from? So, if I think about where I was last year when I was ready to launch this podcast, I would say I had all of the assets. I had the marketing assets, I had the material, everything was ready, but I wasn't ready. So, what I had to understand about myself was I was so afraid of what other people would think and how they would misunderstand or misjudge me. And it wasn't about it not being ready. It was about the safety mechanism that perfectionism had me holding on to. I was afraid to let something out into the world and be scrutinized by people, by my peers, by people I didn't know. And I was just so scared that I could not move past that fear. And I disguise that fear as perfectionism. And it's a real thing that happens to you in your body, in your soul, and it happens in business. And if I had to describe it in my own words, I would say that it felt like I was ready to jump rope. But every time the space and opportunity presented itself for me to jump in, I just felt like I was going to be hit by the rope. I felt like I was going to mess things up. And I just couldn't release the podcast at that time. I could not let it go. And I had to really go back and recalibrate and think about what the real reasons were and what was I protecting? Was I protecting my image? Was I protecting my family? Like what was I protecting? And at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with my high standards and my high achievings. I've got degrees up the wazoo. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fear of failing publicly. That's what it was for me. So I'm naming that. I'm giving you some context, but I really want to talk about what the three myths that are keeping people from really getting that level of understanding. And number one is perfectionism means that you have high standards. And I'm here to call BS because this is one that many of us wear like a badge of honor that, oh, I'm just a perfectionist. I hold myself to these high standards. I care deeply about what I put out. That is, yes, you do. We know you have high standards. We know you care deeply about what it is that you put out in the universe. But I'm going to say this very clearly. Some of people I know genuinely do have high standards. That's real. That's part of the reason why you get the clients you get and the results you get them. But the high standards and the perfectionism, they're not the same thing. So if we talk about research and we talk about data and stats, the research makes the clear distinction that high standards mean you know what excellent looks like and you know how to move forward and you know what the purpose and mission and value is. But if you can finish something and you decide it's good enough, you'll move forward. You can receive the feedback without collapsing. You can release the version of the podcast and knowing version 2 is going to be better, or version 3 and the second and third iteration is going to be better. But the perfectionism is the real clinical. If we talk about real clinical perfectionism, it's when your self-worth is contingent on an outcome, or it's attached to this external validation. So I'm going to say that again. Perfectionism, the real clinical definition of perfectionism is when you attach your self-worth to an external validation, or it's contingent upon an outcome. And when the work is attached to your worth, everything you do, every imperfect output doesn't just feel like evidence that the work needs improvement. It feels like something is wrong with you. And that's a complete fucking lie. And here's what the research really says about where that comes from. And Psychology Today published findings in early 2025. And this stopped me when I read it, is that nearly 70% of high achieving professionals use achievement to secure the validation they missed growing up. And growing up with inconsistent attention or conditional love teaches the nervous system that being good isn't enough to secure that safety or that belonging. So it pushes you to be perfect instead. So you have this conditional regard, this idea that love, approval, or acceptance is contingent upon you meeting some unrealistic standard, that you have to perform well, you have to achieve these outcomes, and you have to fulfill a particular role. And if that's your environment, when that's your environment, and this doesn't have to be dramatic, it can be subtle. It can be a family that celebrated wins and went quiet around the losses that you had. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be the school that rewarded excellence, but they ignored your struggle. Your nervous system learns from those things. And if you are inherently tying your worth to an external outcome or external validation, that worth is not inherent, that worth is earned. And then in adulthood, this becomes this engine underneath that we all call perfectionism. There's this relentless sense that you must keep performing at this unrealistic and high expectation. And if you're not performing at that relentless high performing expectation, then you're not acceptable. You're not lovable. You're not safe. That's not a character flaw. That's not a personality trait. That's conditioning. You're conditioned by your environment. And you can't fix conditioning by lowering the bar or waiting until you're ready, or you literally or figuratively, you cannot. That lesson is taught to you, and you don't know how to name it specifically. But I need you to know I've been there. I know what that's like. I was that kid. I was the kid who had straight A's. I was the kid that didn't want to create and wreak havoc on my parents, because I saw with what they went through with my older siblings. So I tried to be that person they didn't have to worry about. And I wasn't checked on. I've been the strong friend. I've been the person that looks successful on paper, but nobody checks on. And realistically, all of those things have done nothing but create this environment and this nervous system that prepared me to not release something unless it was completely perfect. And that's insane. So I just want to describe that feeling of what it's like to be in that space and where that type of imperfection cost you. And I want you to recognize what it really is. So, myth number 2, perfectionism is the same for everyone. No, child, no. Because here's something: the conventional conversation about perfectionism is that always names it. Almost never names that there are different types of perfectionism. And the type that is most common in this specific audience, especially the audience that I serve, those high achieving, high value service providers, the people who are established, who have results, who are excellent, brilliant, show up polished. It's not self-oriented perfectionism. It is socially prescribed perfectionism. Socially prescribed perfectionism. And that's the distinction that changes the solution. Self-oriented perfectionism is when you hold yourself to high standards because of your own internal drive. We all have that. Anybody that's a high achiever, they have that because you genuinely want to do good work. You genuinely want to do a good job because the standards come from you. They come from inside. But the socially prescribed perfectionism that I'm talking about is when the standards come outside of you, from the belief that other people expect that from you, that level of perfectionism, and that imperfection will cost you something essential. That's bullshit. And the research published across multiple peer reviewed journals and research articles identifies socially prescribed perfectionism as the most strongly linked type of perfectionism when it comes to anxiety, burnout, emotional fatigue, because the standards are so high and so unrealistic that when it comes from an external source, it means that you're never, ever, ever going to be fully in control of what it means, and your nervous system is never going to adapt, which it's always going to remain on high alert. And here is the specific thing that I need you to learn and need you to hear: that for the people who grew up being told explicitly or implicitly that they had to be twice as good to get half the credit, and for those people who they were only in the rooms that they felt the weight of that representation, for those people who are marginalized, for the person whose margin of error or their rope and leash is so short when it comes to everyone else compared to everyone else, that's not because of anything that you did. It's not because of something you did. It's because of who they were. The perfectionism was never about you. It was never about your personality. It was a rational response to an environment that penalized imperfection more harshly than it did for other people. And I need you to understand that this type of research confirms it directly, that women, especially women in marginalized groups, face brutal double standards. So having to be basically perfect to be seen as competent, that's bogus. And every time I'm excited to announce that post goes up on social media, because it gives you ammunition for your nervous system to learn early that falling short means falling behind. And and when you build a business and we talk about survival, which most of us are building businesses based on survival mechanism. We all do that. It doesn't matter if you built the business, if you are the business, if you got promoted, it becomes this voice that holds you hostage. And it says, before you make a post, let me check this one more time. Or I don't think it's ready. I don't know if it's ready to be submitted. I don't know if I can expose myself to people. And it's not because the work's not good. It's because some part of you is still in the room that taught you that the cost of imperfection outweighs the cost of you completing it, putting it out into the world, and providing that value that we know you can provide. And that part is trying to keep you safe. That problem is also keeping you stuck. The same thing that is keeping you safe is keeping you stuck. So yeah, I want that to land. And it's more about survival, it's more about protection. But I want to know, what is that actually costing you? How long are you going to carry that unrealistic expectation? And myth number 3 is the solution is to lower your standards or to just push through. And if I'm going to say this out loud, if nobody else is going to, I will. And for the person in the audience that I serve, the one who has built their reputation on delivering at a level that could not be questioned, who earned every bit of trust that they have. And failure has never been an option, but failure is a lesson learned. Now, if you don't think of it as optional, if you've been holding yourself to a higher standard your entire life and you've met it every single time, it's hard to tell those type of people to lower their standards. That's not the type of advice. That's honestly an insult. And I mean that. And to be honest with you, we're too old for that shit. We cannot be telling people to lower their standards. That's not the world we live in, especially for a person who has been habitually delivering high quality work. And here's the other thing that gets handed out constantly: just push through, feel the fear and do it anyway. Get out of your comfort zone. Just do it. And I understand where that comes from. I do. But here's what the advice is missing entirely, is that the perfectionism loop is not a comfort zone issue. It's not a courage issue. It's a nervous system issue. And if you cannot push your way through a nervous system response, the moment you force yourself to hit publish before that pattern has been recognized, has been addressed, that nervous system, baby, that anxiety is going to go through the roof. The second guessing is going to get louder. That voice in your head is going to get louder. The next time, the resistance is going to be stronger. I can assure you that the most intelligent, competent people that I know, they've done it. It doesn't matter what strategy you give them, they're going to revert back to the old perfectionism loop. Pushing through does not heal it, it reinforces it. So what actually works? And this is going to sound simple and it's not easy, but you have to give the protection strategy a different job. And here's what I mean by that. The part of you that keeps rewriting, refining, keeps holding yourself back, that part is not your enemy. That part is actually doing exactly what it was trying to do. And it's made to protect you. It's made to save you. It's made to keep you. It's protecting you from a specific kind of threat. And it learned to watch for. And the work is not to eliminate it. The work is to recognize it when it shows up, name it, and ask a different question. Not, is this perfect yet? Because that's not the right fucking question. The question is this true? Is this mine? Does this say the thing I actually mean it to say? And when the answer to those 3 questions is yes, that's done. It's not perfect, it's done. And I'm going to ask you those questions again. Is this true? Is this mine? Is it in my voice? Does it say the thing that I really want it to say? And if it does, if yes is the answer, then it's done. Because here's what I know about the person who has built their work from something real, from something actual, from real experience and their actual knowledge and their actual care for the people that they serve, is you're imperfect. That's real. And it always will outperform someone else's perfect and polished nothing. And the research backs that up. The trust recession is backing this up. And people are done with this polished perfectionist, and we're done with all this bullshit. And they're done with the generic, broad, does this sound or look good? They're done with that. And what they are really hungry for, they're searching for, is something that could only have come from a specific person with a specific expertise that has a specific life and specifically understands their problem. And if that's you, that's not the perfect version of you. That's the real version of you. And that version of you is the specific, honest, sometimes searching for the right word version. That's not the liability. That's the whole point. And I need you to hear me, my friend, that this is best. My friend said it perfectly. Perfect is to be disconnected from the human soul. And if you're looking for perfection, you are immediately disconnected. You're misaligned and you're misinformed. So I'm going to recap what the key takeaways were as far as the three myths. And the three myths that I hope I debunked. One, perfectionism is not a personality trait. It's more of a protection strategy that your nervous system has developed in response to the environments that penalize imperfection. And you have to understand that those changes, everything, you have to change how you approach things. You're not trying to fix a personality trait or a character flaw. You have to retire that survival strategy that got promoted beyond the job's description. Myth number two, the type of perfectionism that is most common in this type of audience is socially prescribed. It's not the internal drive that we all have. It's the external validation that we're searching for in these rooms that told us that being perfect is where you got the reward. That's the type that was a rational response in those real environments that you were in. It's not a flaw, it's a survival mechanism. And it's no longer serving you. So you have to detach from that. And number three was the solution is pushing through or lowering your standards was the way to solve. And it's recognizing those patterns when they show up. You have to name them. You have to think about what is it really protecting you from? And you have to ask a totally different question. Not is this perfect yet? You have to ask, is this true to me? Is this my version of the truth? And does this say exactly what I needed to say? And if the answer is yes, my friend, you are done. It does not have to be perfect. So in this episode, we named something you're carrying. And I hope if I name something you're carrying, I want you to share it because right now, with someone who is sitting on something and has been sitting on it for so long, trust me, I know I've been sitting on this podcast for over a year. If they need to hear this, please share it, subscribe, and tune back in next week. I'm going to put the links to my social media accounts in the show notes because I really want to open up my DMs so you can tell me if this resonated. And next week, we're going to talk about some different topics. I don't want to give you too much information because this stuff has been good the last couple of weeks. But I'm going to challenge you next week and in the next episodes to think differently, to show up differently. But I hope that you learn something from this and you subscribe so you don't miss next week. And always remember progress is better than perfection and understand where the perfectionism actually comes from. And that's where you need to work on. So do the work, stay booked, stay unbothered until next week. Talk to you later. Bye.